is Angela from Natural Living Alchemy. Welcome to my channel. In today's video, we are going to be fermenting nuts. So let's talk about why we would want to ferment them, and then I'll show you how easy it is. This recipe will work with any nut that you have. I'm personally going to be using hazelnuts because I'm going to be making a homemade Nutella spread. So be sure to come back next week because I'll be making that with you. Fermentation is a metabolic process that converts sugars into acid, gases, or alcohol, and it does this by using beneficial bacteria and wild yeasts found in the air around us. We will be following a lactic acid fermentation process like we normally do on this channel, and that is where the sugars are converted into lactic acid. Other types of fermentation would be alcoholic fermentation, where the yeast convert the sugars into alcohol and carbon dioxide, and we would use this method when we were making wine or beer. And there's also acetic acid fermentation, where the alcohol converts into acetic acid, essentially making vinegar. And this method is most common in fermented condiment recipes. Why ferment nuts? Why would we want to go to the trouble of doing this? Well, the fermentation process will help improve digestibility by breaking down something called anti-nutrients. Anti-nutrients are compounds that are found in plant-based foods that interfere with the absorption of essential minerals and nutrients in the body. By fermenting them, we can reduce these effects and make the nuts easier to digest. Fermentation will also enhance the nutritional content of nuts and seeds significantly by increasing levels of vitamins, antioxidants, as well as probiotics. Do the nuts need to be raw? Ideally, yes, they would, because nuts that have been processed or pasteurized may not ferment properly, which means that they still might ferment just fine though. You see, once nuts are roasted, the sugars in them turn into starches, thus making it unavailable to the wild yeast and the lactic acid bacteria that are required for the fermentation process. Nuts that have gone through the pasteurization process will have reduced amounts of microbes left on them, and we require those microbes for the fermentation process. Now, with all of that being said, where do we stand? So I have definitely read a few different blogs and watched other videos on other channels where they stated that the nuts that they fermented had already been previously processed, they had been roasted, and they worked out just fine. What this means is if all you can find are processed or pasteurized nuts, just use them and see what happens. I did come across a very interesting article on the Stanford Medicine website, and what they're stating is research just appears to be ongoing whether fermenting pasteurized or raw foods is actually the best practice. So if you want to check out the description box below this video, you're going to find a link to the blog article that does accompany this video. And in the blog article, I am going to have that study linked in case you want to check it out. To ferment your nuts, all you're going to need is a strainer. You will need a bowl. We'll need a spoon to stir everything up. You'll need a cloth cover. I like to use these, what is this? This is a cloth napkin. You can also just use a dish towel if you want. And then if you are going to be roasting them, you would need a cookie sheet as well. So our ingredients would be, we would need raw nuts. You would need filtered water, and you're either going to need whey or you're going to need a salt brine of at least 7%. So that means that you would need 35 grams of salt per every 500 grams of water, or 70 grams of salt per 1,000 grams of water that you're going to be using. If you're going to be using the salt brine, you don't necessarily need to be using the whey. And if you're using whey, you don't necessarily need to be using salt, but you certainly could mix the two together if you wanted. I'm personally just going to be using whey in my nuts that I'm going to be fermenting, but you use what you have. Just be sure if you are using salt that you are using either mineral salt or a sea salt. We don't want to be using anything like table salt in a fermentation recipe. What you're going to do is you're going to need to begin by soaking your nuts for at least 8 hours. And I got these ones ready last night before I went to bed. So what you will do is you will put your nuts in a bowl, and then you're going to want to put enough water over top of them that it covers it by about 2 inches. And just know that the nuts will most likely expand as they soak the water. Now, the reason we would do this step is because this is going to help activate the nutrients in a sense, while also neutralizing any enzyme inhibitors or phytic acid. My nuts have been soaking for well over 8 hours. So now what we're going to do is you're going to need your strainer, and you're going to rinse these off just under cold running water. And we just want to make sure that we give it a nice thorough rinse just to remove any residue left over from the soaking process. So once everything has been nicely rinsed off, we are going to put them in a clean container. So I just have a dry cloth here because last night the top of my cloth accidentally got a little bit wet. I just want to use something dry for the rest of this process. So you're going to put your nuts in a clean bowl. And then you're going to want to use filtered water, okay? And you're going to use approximately 2 cups of water for every 1 cup of nuts. So I have just over 2 cups of nuts here, so I have just over 4.5 cups of water. Now, if you were going to be using the salt brine, you would just mix the brine up, put it over, and you would be good to go. But I'm going to be using whey. So you're going to be using 1 tablespoon of whey for, oh my goodness, who closed this? For every 1 cup of nuts. Okay, I sometimes wonder who closes the jars in my house because it is not the same person that opens them. Okay, so we are going to put just over 2 tablespoons of whey into our bowl. And we'll just throw just a little bit more in there. And now we are going to give everything a nice stir. And then we are going to cover this up with a clean cloth or dish towel, because we definitely want the air to still be able to circulate while simultaneously keeping any contaminants out. You are then going to store your bowl in a dark, warm location for between 24 to 48 hours. And I'm going to suggest coming back after 24 hours and taste them. See if you like the flavor. After the 24 to 48 hours, you're then going to rinse your nuts under cold water in your strainer again. And then this comes the step where you can roast them. Now, I'm definitely going to be doing that because that is what is required for my Nutella recipe. But again, you can make anything with this. You can just use these to snack. You can use these to make peanut butter, whatever you want. But to dry them, you're just going to put a layer on a cookie sheet. I have really good success with my stoneware when I use it. So you just want to do a flat layer. You're going to throw them in the oven. You're going to put your oven on the lowest setting that it can go on. So that's about 170 in my oven. And you're going to roast them for up to 12 hours. Now, I will suggest you start checking them after the 8-hour mark to see if you like the flavor, if you like how much they've been roasted and how much they've been dehydrated. You do, though, want to make sure that you do stir the nuts every few hours just to ensure that they are roasting evenly. All right, we have now reached the notes and substitutions portion of this video, where I give you additional notes that are things I find interesting and different substitutions that you might want to consider making. So you can use fermented nuts to make a homemade nut butter that is far healthier than any store-bought version would be. Now, there is no need to dehydrate your nuts before making nut butter, but I personally do like the flavor that roasting gives it, but it's not necessary. You can use this recipe for any nut that you like, except cashews do have a 6-hour soaking maximum. If you are roasting your nuts, you could also sprinkle them with fine-grained sea salt before you throw them in the oven. If you don't have any whey, you could use another acid like freshly squeezed lemon juice or apple cider vinegar. The acid is just going to help create an environment that will promote the fermentation process while inhibiting any pathogenic or harmful bacteria. If you are going to be using something other than whey, I would definitely put some of that salt brine in there. So this process can also be used to ferment seeds, making those more bioavailable and digestible as well. Now be sure to come back next week where I show you how to make this into a delicious homemade Nutella spread. So don't forget to hit the like button if you like this video and share it with anyone else who you think might enjoy it. Consider subscribing to the channel so that we can spend more time together and that you don't miss future videos. But I just want to say thanks for stopping by today, and I will see you next time.